The chamber was already simmering with tension, the kind of atmosphere that feels combustible even before a spark. Journalists shuffled their notes, cameras panned with precision, and an uneasy silence hung over the room like a curtain just before a storm breaks. Then Laura Loomer leaned forward, her voice sharp, her words deliberate. She didn't come armed with policy or persuasion, she came with poison. Out spilled a racially charged insult, meant to cut Jasmine Crockett down, to turn identity into a weapon. The sound landed like a slap. A ripple of gasps coursed through the chamber. Some members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others dropped their eyes, unwilling to confront the ugliness unfolding in plain sight. What Loomer had hurled was not just an insult, it was an attempt at erasure, a reminder of how power too often cloaks itself in cruelty. And for a breathless instant, it seemed the attack might hang unanswered, that the silence might swallow the moment whole. But then Jasmine Crockett raised her head. Her face was calm, her eyes unflinching. She didn't match venom with venom. She didn't raise her voice or roll her eyes. She simply delivered a line so sharp in its restraint, so devastating in its simplicity, that the entire chamber shifted on its axis. I am 12 years older. 5 words, steady and precise. They cut deeper than any insult could. Crockett had not merely parried Loomer's attack. She had inverted it, transforming the insult into evidence of her own strength. What was meant to belittle became proof of experience, dignity, and command. For a second there was silence. Not the silence of complicity, but of awe. Then came the murmurs, the phones raised to record, the recognition that something extraordinary had just happened. Within minutes, clips of the exchange began flooding social media feeds, captions flashing across timelines. Dignity versus hate. Watch Jasmine Crockett's comeback. In that moment, Crockett had not only defended herself, she had shifted the battlefield entirely, but this was only the beginning of a clash that would set the internet ablaze. It would have been easy to dismiss the moment as just another sharp jab in the endless theater of politics. But the truth is, what happened in that chamber was more than an exchange of words. It was a referendum on the kind of country America wants to be. At its core, the confrontation was about dignity versus degradation. Loomer's insult was not accidental. It was a deliberate echo of the old playbook, one that has sought for generations to weaponize race, gender, and identity. It was a reminder of the forces that still thrive on silencing, belittling, and reducing people to stereotypes. And yet, Crockett's reply carried a weight far beyond herself. It wasn't simply personal, it was universal. In those 5 words, she spoke for every immigrant who has been mocked for an accent, every black woman whose intelligence has been doubted, every person told they did not belong in rooms of power. She stood not just for herself, but as a mirror of millions who have endured those same dismissals in their own lives. The stakes, then, weren't about one viral clip. They were about whether grace could outshine cruelty, whether composure could expose arrogance, whether dignity still had the power to win in an arena that so often rewards the opposite. And Loomer's presence made those stakes even clearer. Her history was one of provocation, not slips of the tongue, but carefully crafted outrage designed to travel fast and wide. To her, cruelty wasn't a mistake, it was a strategy. Outbursts weren't accidents, they were her currency. Each insult was meant to buy her more attention, more airtime, more clout in the endless circus of controversy. Crockett, on the other hand, had built a reputation in stark contrast. Sharp, relentless, unwilling to let venom go unanswered. She was the type who didn't shrink when confronted, who cut through bluster with clarity. This clash wasn't just personal, it was archetypal. It was the embodiment of 2 opposing visions of public life, one rooted in arrogance, the other in authenticity. And the timing mattered. America is in a moment where these battles are not theoretical. They play out every day, in schools, in workplaces, in families. Who gets to speak with authority? Who gets to be taken seriously? Who gets reduced to a punchline? So when Crockett's words began replaying across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, the country wasn't just laughing at a clever line. They were deciding which vision they wanted to embrace. The insult was personal, but the response was about to echo far beyond that room. Laura Loomer has never been a stranger to controversy. In fact, controversy is her chosen habitat. From the earliest days of her public life, she learned that provocation was the shortest route to visibility. While other candidates campaigned on ideas, Loomer campaigned on outrage. She burst onto the scene not with quiet dedication, but with stunts designed to hijack attention. She interrupted events, shouted down opponents, stormed stages, chained herself to doors. Each action was carefully staged for maximum virality. Each confrontation was less about the issue at hand and more about ensuring her name would trend the next morning. To her supporters, this made her fearless. They saw someone willing to say what others wouldn't, someone who rejected the etiquette of political correctness. But peel back the performance and another picture emerges, one of calculated cruelty, where shock value mattered more than truth and visibility mattered more than service. Her social feeds became a pipeline of venom. Muslims, immigrants, people of color, all became targets in the sweeping condemnations she delivered with a sneer. When social media platforms banned her, she held it up as proof of her power, evidence that she was too real for the establishment. But what she left unsaid was why she was banned, not for bravery, but for violating basic rules of decency again and again. She built her brand on contradiction. She claimed to be silenced, yet her voice echoed louder than ever through headlines and interviews. She positioned herself as a victim of persecution, even as she wielded words that dehumanized others. She spoke of defending freedoms, but her rhetoric narrowed who those freedoms should apply to. It was opportunism, cloaked as authenticity. And for years, it worked. Outrage was her oxygen, and she inhaled deeply. But there is a fragility in arrogance. For all her bravado, Loomer's power relied on her ability to control the stage, to dictate the tempo of the fight. As long as she could force others into shouting matches, she thrived. Chaos was her arena, and she knew how to turn it to her advantage. Until Jasmine Crockett. Because Crockett didn't play the part assigned to her, she didn't flinch or lash out. She refused to feed the spectacle. When Loomer launched her racially charged jab, expecting to dominate yet another viral cycle, Crockett answered with 5 words that drained the venom of all its power. And for the first time, the formula faltered. The chaos Loomer thrived in began to turn against her. The insult that should have humiliated her opponent instead humiliated her. She thrived in chaos, but this time, chaos turned against her. Her words were supposed to humiliate, but instead, they set the stage for her undoing. Jasmine Crockett's path to this moment could not have been more different from her opponent's. Hers was not the story of staged stunts or desperate grabs for attention. It was the story of a woman who learned early that dignity is not inherited but built, brick by brick, through sacrifice, resilience, and a refusal to bow. She was raised in a household where the odds were stacked against her, but so was the willpower to overcome. Family dinners were not about boasting or bravado. They were about survival, perseverance, and faith that hard work could carve out space even in a world tilted against you. Crockett knew what it meant to be underestimated, to be told without words, and sometimes with them, that her presence was an exception rather than a norm. Law school was not a privilege taken for granted, but a battlefield of its own. Long nights bent over casebooks, professors quick to doubt her sharpness, peers too ready to dismiss her voice. She learned not only the law, but the necessity of unshakable self-belief. When doors slammed, she pressed forward. When voices shouted her down, she learned to hold her own with clarity and force. That training carried her into public service. Crockett didn't begin with grand stages. She began in the trenches, defending clients who couldn't afford high-priced attorneys, taking cases others overlooked. She listened, she fought, and she refused to back away from the ugly realities that law and politics often tried to sweep under the rug. Her constituents didn't see her as a performer. They saw her as one of them, someone who knew struggle firsthand, and when she rose into Congress, she carried those same qualities with her. While others came in armed with talking points, Crockett came armed with the same ferocity she had shown in classrooms and courtrooms, unapologetic, sharp, unwilling to let injustice hide behind rhetoric. But that rise was not without scars. She bore the weight of sexism, of being dismissed as too emotional, too inexperienced, or too ambitious. She bore the weight of racism, the subtle digs, the overt sneers, the sideways glances that questioned whether she had earned her seat or stumbled into it. Each slight became another layer of armor, another reason to stand taller. So when Loomer fired her insult across the chamber, Crockett's response was not improvised. It was decades in the making. It was the product of every moment she had been told she didn't belong, every battle she had fought to prove she did. Her calm wasn't the absence of feeling. It was the culmination of a lifetime spent learning that dignity disarms hatred more effectively than fury ever could. And that authenticity, that difference in the foundation of their stories, is what set Crockett apart. Loomer's persona was opportunism wrapped in noise, built on the quicksand of shock value. Crockett's presence was authenticity built on struggle, rooted in the soil of real sacrifice. As the world watched, it was clear which foundation would endure, and those very qualities would prepare her for the defining moment she faced. The exchange could have ended with that first devastating reply. Crockett's "I am 12 years older" was already traveling across timelines, already cementing itself as one of those moments that linger long after the cameras stop rolling. But Laura Loomer was not built to walk away. Her strategy had always been to double down, to turn one insult into a barrage, to escalate until her opponent either cracked or lost patience. So she leaned in again, her voice rising, her words sharpened with indignation. She repeated her attack, dressed it in new phrasing, as if saying it louder might somehow make it truer. To her, this was the only playbook she knew. Repeat the cruelty, escalate the tone, force the spotlight to stay fixed on her. But Crockett did not budge. She did not return fire with the same venom. She did not meet volume with volume. Instead, she remained steady, her gaze fixed, her posture unshaken. She was a mountain, immovable, while Loomer thrashed like a storm, desperate to uproot it. The chamber could feel the difference. The more Loomer ranted, the more the energy shifted. Murmurs spread, eyebrows arched, phones tilted upward to capture the spectacle. Some in the audience chuckled under their breath, others shook their heads. Loomer, once so skilled at dominating the tempo, was beginning to look desperate, as though she could sense the viral moment slipping from her grasp and was clawing to take it back. Crockett's restraint wasn't weakness, it was strength reframed. By refusing to rise to the bait, she turned the spectacle against its creator. Each insult that Loomer hurled fell flatter than the last. Each attempt to regain control only underscored how much she had already lost. And then came the shift. Crockett straightened in her seat, leaned forward just slightly, and prepared to speak again. The murmurs hushed. The storm raged on one side of the chamber, but all eyes were drawn to the calm presence on the other. The audience could sense it coming. Something decisive. Something that would not just parry the insult, but dismantle it entirely. Then, with the nation watching, Crockett delivered a counterattack so devastating it left her opponent visibly rattled. It began with silence, the kind of silence that precedes impact, when everyone knows a line is about to be crossed, a truth about to be unleashed. Jasmine Crockett let the air hang for a second longer, as though allowing Loomer's own words to echo back against her. The audience leaned in, phones steadied, journalists scribbled, then she spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, not hurried or heated. She did not need to shout, she did not need to match Loomer's energy. The power of her words came not from volume but from precision. You think my age, my skin, my background diminish me? No. They define my strength. They are the reason I am here when so many said I could not be. You think your insult wounds me? It only shows the emptiness of your argument. The words rippled through the chamber. Loomer shifted in her chair, her smirk faltering. She tried to interject, but the weight of the moment was already pressing down. Crockett didn't pause for heckles. She anticipated them, folding them into her rhythm. See, when you attack me for who I am, rather than what I've done, you confess something about yourself. You confess that you cannot match me on substance. You confess that your arsenal is empty, so you reach for hate. But I am not here to spar with shadows. I am here to stand for those who refuse to be erased. The chamber stirred. A few claps broke out, then hushed quickly, as though people realized they were witnessing something that demanded focus, not interruption. Cameras zoomed in. The clip was already destined for millions of views. Crockett leaned in further, her eyes locking on Loomer. You say this is about me. It's not. It's about the message you send to every little girl who looks like me, to every immigrant who fights to belong, to every American who is told they are less. You want to make me the punchline of your joke, but tonight, you made yourself the punchline. Gasps rippled, followed by a stunned hush. Loomer tried again to fire back, but her retort landed awkwardly, tripping over itself. The venom that once commanded attention now seemed brittle, forced, even tired. The more she flailed, the clearer it became. The moment had slipped beyond her reach, and Crockett knew it. She paused, letting the silence deepen once more, and delivered the finishing blow. 12 years older and light years ahead of you. The chamber erupted. Applause cracked through the air. Phones shot upward in unison, capturing the eruption of energy. Hashtags practically wrote themselves. Hashtag light years ahead. #dignity. Hate. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't smirk or taunt. She simply leaned back, composed, as though she had said only what needed to be said and nothing more. It was the restraint, the refusal to indulge in theatrics, that made the moment resonate so deeply. Meanwhile, Loomer fumbled for footing, her voice rising, but the crowd's reaction drowned her out. The authority she once commanded through sheer audacity had been shattered, replaced with a spotlight that no longer flattered but exposed. And beyond that chamber, the explosion had already begun. Clips were clipped, captions added, commentary drafted. The battle had been decided in the room, but outside the shockwaves were about to spread even further. But outside that room, the real explosion was just beginning. The clip left the chamber before anyone even walked out of it. Within minutes, the moment was plastered across Twitter feeds, Instagram reels, and TikTok loops. Jasmine Crockett's words, calm, poised, devastating, were replayed in endless cycles, each upload accumulating thousands of views by the hour. Hashtags ignited like brush fire. Hashtag light years ahead. #dignityvshate. #I am 12 years older. The internet did what it always does. It turned words into weapons of its own. Memes spread instantly. Loomer's shocked expression frozen beside Crockett's composed gaze. Split-screen edits showing Crockett's line alongside historical moments of civil rights defiance. Captions that read like rallying cries. But unlike so many viral clips that fade as quickly as they rise, this one carried something heavier. It wasn't just entertainment, it was affirmation. People who had endured similar dismissals, people who had been told they were too old, too black, too female, too immigrant, too different, they saw themselves in Crockett. Her words became theirs. Commentators weighed in. Journalists dissected the moment with the fervor of cultural critics. Activists praised the dignity of Crockett's reply. Even celebrities chimed in, amplifying the line to audiences who might never have otherwise tuned in to that chamber. Finally, one headline blared, a takedown rooted in dignity, not venom. And yet the coverage wasn't just about Crockett's composure. It was also about what Loomer represented. Commentators dug into her history, replayed her controversies, highlighted the contradictions of someone who built a career on provocation but stumbled when met with grace. Loomer became not just a person, but a cautionary tale of what happens when arrogance collides with authenticity. The ripple effects were impossible to ignore. Young women posted videos of themselves repeating Crockett's line, some with tears in their eyes, others with fists raised in pride. Community groups turned the clip into a teaching tool, proof that dignity can be sharper than hate. Even those far removed from politics found themselves pulled into the orbit of the moment, sharing the clip with captions like, "This is what strength looks like." But perhaps the most powerful validation came not from pundits or headlines, but from ordinary people. In coffee shops and kitchens, in text threads and group chats, people whispered some version of the same thing. "She said what I've always wanted to say." What started as an insult became a national conversation, and in the wake of it all, one message began to rise above the noise. At the center of that message was a truth both timeless and timely. Dignity is the sharpest weapon. Jasmine Crockett didn't just parry an insult, she reframed an entire narrative. Her words were not about humiliation or revenge. They were about refusing to let hate dictate the terms of engagement. In a moment designed to reduce her, she elevated herself and, by extension, everyone who had ever been diminished in similar ways. Her reply reminded America that worth is not measured by age, race, or background. Worth is measured by resilience, by character, by service. Loomer's attempt to weaponize identity backfired because Crockett's identity was not a liability. It was her strength. The resonance of the moment went deeper still. It called back to a lineage of leaders who faced similar attacks and responded not with surrender, but with dignity. It echoed the composure of civil rights marchers who held their heads high while insults rained down. It recalled the quiet defiance of women who refused to be sidelined in boardrooms and classrooms. It tied today's battle to the generational fight for respect. That has always been at the heart of America's progress, and that was the final triumph of Crockett's moment. Loomer faded into the background, her insults remembered only as a setup for the response that obliterated them. Crockett's dignity, on the other hand, lingered, a reminder that arrogance eventually crumbles while authenticity endures. The moral wasn't just political, it was deeply personal. It told viewers that when they face insults in their own lives, they too can choose dignity. They too can remember that calm composure often cuts deeper than fury, that standing firm speaks louder than shouting back. And as the dust settled, Crockett's line grew beyond a clapback. It became a declaration of values, that America's strength lies not in cruelty, but in compassion, not in arrogance, but in dignity. In the face of arrogance, dignity is the sharpest weapon. By the time the week ended, one phrase had taken on a life of its own: "I am 12 years older." What began as a comeback had become a declaration, a rallying cry that stretched far beyond the chamber where it was first spoken. It wasn't just about Jasmine Crockett versus Laura Loomer. It wasn't even just about politics. It was about the universal truth that dignity defeats hate. That no matter how venomous the attack, no matter how sharp the insult, composure and truth can still pierce deeper. This story reminds us that the battles we watch on screens are mirrors of the battles we face in our own lives. Whether in workplaces, schools, or homes, the insults may differ, but the choice remains the same: respond with anger or respond with dignity. Jasmine Crockett showed the power of the latter, and in doing so, reminded us of our own. So if this moment moved you, don't let it stop here. Share it, carry it, live it, be part of the movement where dignity triumphs over arrogance, where authenticity dismantles opportunism, where hate is met not with silence, but with strength. Because I am 12 years older wasn't just a line, it was a legacy in the making, and it's one we all have a role in continuing